Okay, there's the infinity screen. We'll get rid of it in a second, guys. And yeah, you have here a lovely image from Niels. Trees being cut down, I'm guessing. Is that right, Niels?
Yeah, it was put down for removal, so
And
that's
the
a
question
pretty.
you ask is this a target canker or perennial canker, a canker that keeps on coming back and back and back? Remember, a canker is just really another word for a wound. And yes, this is a perennial canker. Um, and the next question is it bacterial or fungal? And the answer is yes, it is bacterial fungal, most likely fungal. Um, and it's a wonderful example. And I've got some lovely ones of these that were moved because they were deemed to be culturally modified trees. Um, so again, you can see how easy it is to confuse the reality. And your comment was there's not a lot of decay. And the answer is no, because it's not a decay fungi.
Bugger all
It's a
decay in there.
pathogen. That's right. Remember, pathogens kill live. There's not a lot of live tissue. So it's not affecting the live tissue, except where it comes back in on the margins again. And it's beautiful. I mean, I hope hopefully you kept some of that. It'll make a great specimen. Definitely worth having located and found. Um,
Mm.
so these
Yeah,
are,
I didn't get a slice of it.
yeah, often called bullseye cankers and or bullseye target cankers or bullseye tankers for obvious reasons. And the next question you sent to me was, this is an acacia melanoxylon. It's had a couple of branches fall out the same way, and it looks like that it's that process of ray attack or ray sabotage. And you're absolutely right. That's what's been going on here. The rays have rotated 90 degrees. Um, why? I have no idea why. How do you detect it? I've got no idea. Have we got any other mentors online that might want to have a stab as to why they think it happens? Um, but
I
again,
thought it was pretty cool that there was two branches with it on the same side of the tree too.
yeah, look, I mean, I
Showing
suspect
symptoms.
that they're a lot more common than we believe. And I suspect that in most cases, the tree manages to deal with it, probably by having enough prop tissue. Um, but in this case, that's certainly not what has happened. And you've had some failures. Um, what would you do? Um, well, first of all, I don't know that I can detect it yet. So I'm not sure how you would detect whether that was the case with the other branches. But if I was worried, I'd just do a little bit of load reduction, some branches somewhere between 25 and 50 mils in diameter towards the end. So trying to bring that crown back in a little bit and reduce the load. And that's all I'd do with it.
Hmm.
The tree itself, the trunk is not substantially compromised. So whilst it looks ugly, it's dealing with it fairly well.
I think it looks
Anyone else?
pretty neat. It looks pretty neat.
Yeah, it does, but of course it's not what we want because we get a failure and we can say to people, look, we know what it is and we know why it is, in the sense of what's happening anatomically, but we don't know why it does it anatomically, and particularly something like acacia melanoxylon, which is not a closed forest species. So because it's not a closed forest species, it means that you're going to end up with um, the branches not trying to shed naturally. Whereas if we talk about closed forest species, um, Seligna, less extent blackbutt, Brandis, where the canopy is closed and they get rid of a lot of the lower branches, microcories, um, they tend to do it more often, and I suspect related to that process of saying, look, I know this is going to end up being a branch that could get from 2 centimeters to 10 centimeters or 15 centimeters in diameter, but I'm going to get rid of it eventually. It's obvious from where I'm growing, whereas this has got no reason to do it. Um,
So you
so
wouldn't really get large branches with that sort of ray attack, really, because they would have
well,
fallen
you
off
can,
before they get big. I would think.
yeah, no, once it starts, it stays. And in a species like the closed forest ones I just mentioned, Regnans would be another one for you guys down south. Um, it's intending to get rid of those lower branches. And, that's why you get these beautiful, long, straight, slender single stems in the lower part of the tree.
These are all nicolets you're talking about, aren't you, Mark?
Yeah, but it occurs in lots of other things.
Yeah.
And I said, we know it exists. We don't know how to detect it. And unfortunately, our forensic work is not good enough yet that we see any data about it. And we have very few deaths, so there's not a lot of data at all. Tree failure databases are fundamentally flawed because we're requiring people of all different skills to give information. That means you get incorrect data. And so we're really stuck with saying it's in the background risk again. We may know that it might be more likely to occur in some species, but even then, if we said, well, 10 times more likely to occur than in other species, the average species, is still not a huge order of magnitude. It's just one order of magnitude. It's not, like we're getting something that's got a 1 in 10 or a 1 in 100 chance of doing it. So we don't have that high likelihood of failure. Does that make sense for you, Nels?
Yeah, yep. I remember you said that before, with the automatically shedding the branches, the lower branches, but I thought the blackwood would be it's not a canopy species. It's like the
I'm surprised
understory,
it's there, but not surprised. It's one that I would be less inclined to expect it in, but it's clearly, and maybe that's something that sometime in the next 20 or 30 years we'll get more information on. If you were to have a tree like this and it was coming out, or a branch that was coming out, it'd be really great to just cut maybe 1 times trunk diameter above, 1 times trunk diameter below, and do a axial cross section and polish that up and have a look at it microscopically. It'd be interesting to see if there's any other telltales that gave us that information. And again, we don't do that very often, so we just don't have enough information. We know it's there. We know that Maddox changed and clarified his comments on these things, and we're still nowhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just quickly on the target canker, what do you reckon about the structural stability? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff missing if you look at the cross section there.
Yeah, look, I think the branch was probably going to have problems physiologically before it had problems structurally. If we looked at where that would have been, that probably would have been a circle somewhere around there. So now you pushed all this material out further. That gives stability. And the tree has been developed.
So it's put more material on further out.
And there's almost no loss of other tissue. It's just the tissue hasn't formed. So the ISA says that when cankers get around about 50% of the circumference as an increase, that was dropped down to 1/3. But without any substance to it. I think it's just precautionary. So something like just the one there or the one there, I wouldn't worry about them. I don't think I've.
What about when you've got 3 of them in the same spot like the other one?
Yeah, look, I might think about that a little bit more. I think what will have happened is, and you can see it here, there's almost no living tissue left here. Okay, the canker's just having a real good go at it, the fungus. Doesn't look like there's a lot there. And that looks there like that's our sapwood, very thin layer there of healthy sapwood, and all the rest is gone. So I suspect that, if you'd left it another 10 years, you might have had a dead branch or a dead stem.
Yep.
But I can't think of one I've ever seen that's failed. And it'd be interesting to see if somebody has. I have seen cankers fail on Corymbia maculata. There's one that gets in and causes big nodulations on the stem, and I have seen those fail, but that also introduces some decay with it, where you're getting this essentially no impact on decay and then getting a zone that's self-protected. I think you can just enjoy it and watch it. And again, depending on what your target is, if this was in the middle of a bus station, just beside a bus station, I would treat that very differently than if it was in a park. A suburban park is probably not going to be used when that is likely to get loaded to the point of failure.
It's
I'm not sure
like
how.
from a QTRA point of view, it'd be hard to kind of distinguish which part would be the weakest and where it would fail.
Yeah, I would bring that back down to probably being something like a 6 rather than a 7. That's what I'm saying. It's, if someone said 5, I'm not going to argue 4. I'd start to question. So that gives you it from a QTRA perspective.
And that's even though you just said you've never actually seen something fail in a canker.
I think it's reasonable enough to express some degree of uncertainty, which is why I'd go to a 6. And I understand that a lot of people are a lot more risk averse than I am, Peter. So I respect that. If this came back, and I'll show you a report that I've redacted for tonight to go through if we don't have much more to do in terms of immediate questions, and you'll see how people misuse risk assessments. And so the good news is, I was just speaking to Peter about half an hour ago, the case for an Australian standard for tree risk assessment has now been formally lodged to Standards Australia. So hopefully we'll have an answer in the next 12 weeks or so as to whether that's going to proceed. And that standard will not tell you that you've got to use A system or B system or C system, or that you can't develop your own system, but it will tell you things that you need to do. And, giving some rationale for this would be something that, would be reasonably expected.
So there's already the minimum industry standard for tree risk assessment.
There is one already. ArborAustralia has one. And so it'll essentially be a lot more an expanded version, a significantly expanded version of that. And it'll say what things are desirable. So they're shoulds, and it'll say what things are musts or shalls, and the shalls let you know that, for example, you can't say that a branch might fail. You need to be more specific about it than a branch. I'm risk assessing this particular branch because, let's be honest, I think every tree I could be pretty sure is going to drop a branch in the next year. If we take a branch to be anything that has supported leaves at some stage or other, then every twig that falls is a branch. We just call them twigs, meaning small branch. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that will improve the situation. I think it'll help practitioners clarify what they're doing when they do a risk assessment. We often, somehow or other, just get caught up in the emotives of it, and it's easy enough to do. So last.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Peter, can you tell me who sent this in? I want to give them credit. I can't tell you who sent it in, but this is a casuarina or ala casuarina on a beach area that's had a washout. How would you describe the root system?
Deep and not
rapidly branching. So a heart rooter, I think, is the term that Maddox chosen for it. So yeah, we've got lots of deep roots, lots of rapid division of roots, and that's typically what you'd expect to see be the general configuration during conditions fast drainage with a tree. So a great little shot to have a look.
It's from Mark Taylor, who comes from Mooloolaba.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Any questions on that one? And again, if you're looking at this and said, well, hang on, it's going to need to be following the new standard. I need to be 12 times away from this tree. Well, we work the trunk out, so it's about equivalent to about a 200 mil diameter trunk. Well, there's 3 times. I could cut everything on that side out have real no effect on the tree. So that's a great example of being able to explain that the root system changes its morphology based on genetics, based on soil texture, percolation rates, and soil interface problems and things like that. So it's a really little. Yep. Okay. Now, if I go to a PDF called Redacted, this is a risk assessment. I hope all the identification. I'm not meaning to want to shame or upset anyone, but it came up in my searches. I do a search fairly regularly on trees and the news, and it just lets me know what's going on around the place. Like, there's a really nice new wind turbine system that's made to look like a tree with little mini turbines, lift turbines, and for just around about $120,000, you can have your own little mini turbine. That came up in the news feed for today. But this came up on Friday. I had a look at it and I thought, oh, okay, pretty unusual situation. And I have to read the risk assessment. There it was, uploaded on the internet, able to be read. So we had a architect who does arboriculture. He's gone out, he's done a risk assessment, and it's for accounts to White Cedar. Okay, well, nothing wrong with that. I guess I'm a bit pedantic, but they should be italicized. We should keep the scientific convention. We've got a tree.
Mark, probably can't do anything about it, but you are breaking
Am
up
I?
fairly badly.
Okay. How's that? Any better?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Thanks. I'll
working
just
now.
slow down when that happens, Peter. And no, there's not much I can do about it. I have no idea why it's doing it. I will get a new computer in the next couple of months. Hopefully that'll solve it. So the tree's White Cedar. It's 6 meters high. It's got a crown spread of 12 meters. And we actually have some images of it, which is really neat. This is our tree here. And the landscape architect, I don't know whether arborist is the right way. I don't know what his qualifications or her qualifications are in arboriculture. They're trained. As I understand it, in track, I say that. I haven't declared that. But they've certainly used the track system and they've used it with some degree of competence. So this is our tree here. There's a substation, transformer. Here's our tree from the other side, and there's the transformer on the other side. Everyone can see that fairly easily. Yeah, good. So here comes our risk assessment. First of all, he's done below. He says the elongated notes and branches of this tree, and the potential for splitting at the attachments on the trunk base. In other words, he's got the length of the branches in them filing like you just showed us images of, Niels. They give us a moderate risk assessment. Okay, and that's where he's come to, and I'll show you his input sheets. So I'll show you his input sheets. Okay. We have the things, the targets. Okay, the adjacent power pole. What do you think is going to hit the adjacent power pole?
The end of the branch, if it failed.
Yeah. What sort of damage do you think it's going to do to the power pole? Nothing. Yeah, that's what I would have thought. The footpath under the canopy, the branch could fall on the footpath, might crack it. But I think that this is badly communicated. I think the assessor, when he's been doing this, hasn't accurately considered the target or hasn't accurately described the target. So I don't know what adjacent power pole is. We get no idea. Footpath, I think he means pedestrians. And road adjacent, I don't think he's worried about the road. I think he's worried about vehicles on the road or vehicles that are parking. And if you look at that picture, there's no cars parked underneath it. So I'm guessing at least some of the time there's not cars there. It's a little country town. I imagine there's probably not cars under it most of the time. Target is within the drip line, yes. Target is in 1 times the height, yes. If the whole tree were to fall over. Do you think he's worried about the whole tree falling over? No.
No.
Target's in 1.5 times the height of the tree. Yeah, well, okay. Again, I don't see the relevance of it if the target of concern is a person walking down the footpath, because the whole tree is not going to come over. Then the occupational rate. Okay, well, the pole's there all the time, and I'm still confused about the pole. I'm not sure that he was thinking when he selected that as a target. I think he was looking for some reason to support the removal of the tree. That's what it reads like to me, than to necessarily remove the tree. Then you've got occupation rate for the other two, the footpath occasional and the road adjacent occasional, and I'd agree with that. Can't move the target, not practical to restrict, we agree with that. Normal canopy removed for power lines overhead to branches, yes, we agree with that. Branches have been removed. So here comes the risk assessment. I will just see if I can go a little fraction larger for you, make it a little easier. Condition of concern. Now, this is where I get really concerned. The condition of the concern is the proximity to the pole. And I don't know that that is the condition of concern. It's branches falling onto or damaging the pole. And I think we've agreed that probably not going to be able to do that. Fall distance, 3 meters, target protection nil. The likelihood that the branches are going to fail. That's where I get really problematic. If I take probable to mean, and now I'm not going to be literal, but probable means more likely than not, which is 50% or higher. But if we say it's in that sort of first order of magnitude, so 1 in 10 to 100% chance, is not probable. Otherwise, we would have talked about already failed branches. The fact that none of the branches have failed tells us that it's not probable but possible. The likelihood of impact of a particular branch, is potentially high, although there's some protection. The fact that it's a hard woody structure that's not going to do anything. Failure and impact is clearly not very likely. It's somewhat likely. And then consequences, minor. And I just find that, again, like, seriously, what do you think it's going to do? It's the canopy, the crown of the tree is below the substation. That means all it's going to do is pole. And I'm guessing that a 100 to 150 mil diameter branch, the end of it hitting the pole will do 0. So minor. Next thing, the overhead lines. Okay, I now get really confused because last time I checked and I was watching an educational series this morning on general relativity. It's something you do at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep to try and get back to sleep. I know gravity still applies. So I don't know how the branches are going to fall up to the overhead lines. But that's what it says. You see how silly that is. Again, it's not that we don't make mistakes. That's exactly what's happened. He's gone out, he's looked at it, he said, oh, yes, I'm concerned about the tree. It's not appropriate. Let me put together a risk assessment that shows the tree should get removed. What he probably should have done is said, there's no reason to remove the tree on the basis of risk, but it's an inappropriate tree for the location. Although I question that, prune mealy is definitely in a lower rainfall area, they are slower growing. And Judy Fakes did some wonderful work with Ted Hoare on it a number of years ago with an electrical authority, and it was so. No, it's improbable that any branch will hit the overhead wire. Could the branches go through and touch the wires? Yes. Those of you who are in Adelaide will sit there and say yes, and those of you who are in New South Wales or Victoria will say you can't do that. In Adelaide, they let them grow through and touch the low voltage wires. No problems at all. By the time you get to the other states, we're of the view that that's not acceptable, and that's fine. And this is New South Wales, so likelihood of impact, yeah, I would say very low. The likelihood of impact, unlikely. And again, what would it do if it took the wire? Well, I've just told you, Adelaide, the trees are permitted, and you've got to go to Adelaide City at some stage or other. You haven't, or the general Adelaide metropolitan area, and see the way that the wires are allowed to touch the trees. Maybe it's a little drier there, and they're less concerned. They don't seem to be concerned at all. So, same.
Are you talking about uncovered bare low voltage power lines?
Yeah, under there, low voltage, not high voltage. No, high voltage is a different deal. You touch high voltage, two phases of high voltage, and you'll cremate things. They'll cook them. So no, that's definitely a no-no. But here's the next thing: canopy, pedestrians on the footpath. Surely the branches are just as likely to fail. If he's talking not generically about branches rather than a specific fault on a specific branch, why is this more likely, less likely to fail, and these more likely to fail? And the reason why is he's mixed up the fact that they're there constantly with the failure. Okay. Then impact is low, and that's correct, and the result should be low. The next one, parked cars. All of a sudden, the cars are parked, and the probability of failure goes up again from possible to probable. Does everyone see why that is a problem? Yeah. If he's looking about the same branches generically, then they should all be at the same level. And the answer is they should have probably all been possible. Or potentially improbable, but that's fine. And therefore, everything would have been low, and the end result would have all been low. Tree with centre of the canopy removed for overhead power lines. Tree is 3 metres from the pole and transformer. Overextended branches. Mitigation none. Removal in favour of electrical infrastructure is recommended. And so it's not a consistent report, and that's the problem. It's not followed the system correctly, and then it's made mistakes. Likelihood of failure is probable. That's not the risk. The likelihood of failure is probable. Recommendations for removal at the earliest opportunity. Does that sound like that's something that's got to be done really quickly?
Yes.
Yeah, in case the branches fall up and the whole concept of general relativity is destroyed. We've got to stop that from happening as quickly as possible. So again, it's not that this is horrid. It's just this has got lots of sloppy things in it that needed to be tidied up. And so take the time when you're doing a risk assessment to go through your report. Look for things like internal consistencies. Is it consistent? Look for things like, have you correctly named the target? Pedestrians, cars, electric. I don't know how you're going to hit that pole. That's just beyond me. When I saw that, I thought, nah, he's just fishing. If it's not a realistic issue, ignore it. Even if the answer came out low for that, I mean, we're talking probably maybe $50 worth of infrastructure damage. If we had 1,000 of those, one of them might get to $500 or $1,000 if everything went wrong. I don't know. Let's be realistic and not even consider it. Let's throw that target in the bin. The obvious targets were people and cars. Let's call them people and cars. Let's not call them footpaths and roads. Footpaths and roads are the things that entreat the target. They're not the target, unless you're worried about it puncturing through the concrete or through the road, which clearly the author wasn't. So the author it just reads like a report that just wasn't well considered. Had it have been a moderate risk and we had no power poles there and we just had cars and pedestrians, I probably would have said, yeah, okay, I get it. Having seen what I've seen, I now think, no, I don't get it. And what I then, as an assessor wanting to look at another assessment, or as a council officer wanting to look at a submission, or as a risk manager looking at how to manage the risk, I then want to go back and look at 20 or 30 street view images and see how many times there's a car under it, and see how many times there's a car parked in the street, see how many times there's a pedestrian walking down the road, and they will give me further information. And I suspect that that if I looked at it more analytically, I'd just tear the report up and say, no, thanks, we need to start again. So it's just a good little example of how things can go from a half-hearted job to bad quite quickly. And, the power pole is still beyond my capacity to think about. It's just one of those odd things. I think realistically, you could have felled every branch on that side to hit the power pole and still not have done anything. Now, I'm not an expert at felling things on power poles, but I think they're pretty hard. Yeah. Any questions, guys? Boy, Peter, we are silent and done for the night at this stage.
I just wanted to thank you, Mark and Peter, for helping me with that driveway relocation between the Fostermans. The council, North Sydney Council, approved that project.
And you did some route investigation?
Not yet, but probably it'll probably come. Yeah, they approved it before we did route investigation.
Yeah, look, I think we often get worried about vehicle crossovers more than we should. And, I'm not suggesting that we need to go hell for leather, but I made a comment during a seminar series last year. And the comment was that if we're not trying to keep trees and sometimes failing, then we're failing. That a part of what we need to do is try as far as we can to have successful tree retention whilst allowing appropriate yield. That is, our job is not to push development further and further and further out from our urban centres. Our job is to try and get trees and people to come together successfully. And I think that sometimes we look at trees and development and say, well, the tree would be best with 12 times trunk diameter, and there's no doubt about that. I think I made comment before, there's a great one at Ryde where Catriona Mackenzie has protected a beautiful blackbutt in front of a block of units on Victoria Road. Magnificent protection, great area, well and truly back, and then a fence around the tree because they're not happy with the risk associated with it and they don't want anyone to be beneath the crown of the tree. And I sit there and think, well, that's really, sort of counterproductive. I want people and trees interacting, not, look, here's a tree that's 55 or 60 years old and we don't want you to have anything else but to look at it. I think people and trees belong together. And interestingly enough, science tells us that's the case. There are a whole pile of fascinating things. For example, the human body reacts negatively to tree removal. So arborists do expose themselves to some risk when they're removing trees all the time. The risk is that their sterol levels will increase. Their bodies don't like it. We're either created or evolved to be tree-friendly creatures. I mean, that's a nice way of describing us. So yeah, Vicky, that's what we're here for. And
thank you for that. But I wanted to ask one question. I don't have any photographs yet, but I have to do a risk assessment on a big black butt as part of a bush block in Grays Point. And the owner is going to be building, and they've got a footprint for the building, a project that was approved, and it's lapsed 2019, so they need a new DA, a new owner. And previously the council gave approval for the tree to be pruned. It's got lots of hollows. When I met the owner there today, he said the neighbours are saying that it's leaning more. Would you consider putting on something attaching to the tree to show if it's moving over time in terms of
one of two things: tree motion sensors or the equivalent. There are a number of things in that category. So that's one option. The second option is sinking some stainless steel hardware into the tree, so some pins that can be hammered in, some reasonably strong pins that are going to go in, stay firm and not move, and then use a digital level and monitor it. But my gut level feeling is it's probably not going to be moving.
Yeah, I've got someone who's more experienced that's going to come and have a look at it for me. But yeah, it's a huge tree, like 1.3 meter DBH. Like it's really big, but it's leaning towards where they're actually going to be building the house. It won't be in the footprint, but yeah, it's above everything. But I'll take lots of photos for the next session, perhaps.
Yeah, look, and again, the risk stays the risk, and in general, we accept that buildings give a fair degree of protection. So it's going to do either some property damage, which is generally the lower cost risk, or it's going to do people injury. And the data that we collected in 2017 showed that whilst the risk of death from trees was sitting at about 1 in 5 million, that dropped down substantially in urban areas. And one of the reasons is that we tend to seek shelter, or we believe one of the reasons is we tend to seek shelter in wind events or weather events that are likely to cause trees to fail without much warning. So I think that generally reduces it down. So 1 in 20 million is a fairly small risk when you consider how many hundreds of thousands, well, millions of trees there are in the Sydney region in and adjacent to areas of high urban use. So
yeah, I'll take lots of photos for next time.
Yeah, and again, remember that I know we talked about it before, and it's worthwhile repeating that our knowledge is changing. We no longer worry about overlong branches as much. We don't worry about tight unions as much. We don't worry about cavities particularly. The list of things that we worry about are dropping down, and our ability to find and detect the things that we are probably going to be more concerned about in time is probably going to be fairly low. So a lot of what we do in terms of risk assessment is cosmetic rather than effective. Certainly arborists haven't substantially reduced the mortality rate from trees since we've been doing our stuff.